Welcome to Principal Behavior Management. Today we are going to be looking at the core reasons of why behaviors happen and 5 principles for managing challenging behaviors. Just a little heads up, some of the videos have little audio blips in them, and it's because we had to take out some resident information. You'll be hearing about HIPAA a lot at your houses and whatnot, so always just make sure we're being very respectful to our residents and honoring their privacy. So let's watch this short little video, and it's just something that you may have seen before out in public, or maybe you've experienced it before firsthand, and we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards. We're probably not going to be dealing with this exact behavior with our residents, but I think we can all relate to a time in our life where something was going on that we would prefer not to be happening, or maybe something that we weren't quite sure how to deal with. So today we are going to talk about what to do in those situations and how to handle them. So the first part of looking at behaviors is looking at why they happen. Caring with individuals with challenging behaviors can be really difficult. It's not a functional task like a G or J tube, feeding, or first aid, or something like that I can give you 3 steps that will just magically fix them. There can be a lot of different variables to behaviors. So we're just going to look at a basic understanding that we can then apply to a lot of different situations. So the biggest thing that you can do as a new staff, and when you encounter something that you're not quite sure what to do with, is to ask questions.
When I first started in DCR back in 2001, I was hired on as an awake nighter at a house. And at that house, we had some medically fragile residents. So it was great because a few weeks in, I got to the place where I was totally trained. I was really happy about being completely trained in it. And that meant knowing things about G-tubes and knowing things about feeding pumps. One night, of course, this always happens in the middle of the night when you're a weeknighter, there was a sound I didn't understand. It was a resident who was making kind of a high-pitched squealing sound, and I didn't know what it meant. So I went into her bedroom, and I checked her feeding tube, and I checked her G-tube, and I made sure there weren't any air bubbles, and that the rate was correct. I took off all of her bedding, checked her temperature, made sure that she was feeling okay, according to the thermometer at least. She seemed fine. So she kept making the sound for a little while, and then I thought, well, I better start looking through her book and seeing if there's anything else I can learn about the sound. So I went through protocols, started in on the standing order meds, and I thought, I might need to give some medicine for this. But then, shortly after that, she quieted down. So in the morning at 6 o'clock when the next person came in, you can bet I was standing right by the door when she came in, and I said, oh, hi, good to see you. I need to know what it means when this resident is making this sound in the middle of the night. And I described it to her, and the staff said, oh, I've only heard her make that sound during the day when she sees her family. When they come over, that's a happy sound she makes. So I was really glad I didn't give any pain medicine for happiness.
Always feel free to ask other staff you're working with or your supervisor if you're unsure of how to handle a situation. So when looking at the functions of behaviors, behaviors can usually be split into 2 categories. They're either to gain or access something desirable, or to end or avoid or escape something undesirable. So on the left side of this chart, if they're trying to gain something, it might be to attain internal stimulation, or it might be external stimulation. So try and figure out what your resident is trying to get. Is it food? Is it attention from staff? Is it an endorphin release or something like that? If they're trying to end or avoid something over on the right side of the chart, it can be broken down the same way, internal or external. Do they have a headache and they can't communicate that to you? Do they just want to spend some time by themselves and not have people around or loud music or something like that? Or are they trying to get out of having to do something? Say they have a dentist appointment and they really don't want to go. So it can be really helpful to figure out what your resident is trying to communicate to you so that you can help them get through that. This little chart here is just some of the things that can go into behavioral explosions. The inside the orange is internal things. Maybe they're frustrated at themselves because they can't communicate how they're feeling. Maybe they're feeling frustrated, having some anxiety, or they have a headache. Could also be external things. Maybe somebody in their house is having a bad day and so they're kind of cranky, which is making that person a little bit cranky. Maybe it's really noisy, or maybe they're thinking about something that happened before that's making them upset. This chart is in no way all-inclusive. There are a million other things that could be on here. But just to give you a good idea of things that could be building up and could have maybe happened earlier that day to cause a behavior. This is a chart of the typical behavior cycle, and we've broken it down into 5 different stages. The first stage is the optimal phase. This is where we want our residents to be. This is where they're functioning well, they're interacting with people appropriately, and they're in a good mood. Phase 2 is warning signs, and this is where you're going to start picking up on things from your resident that maybe things are not going well. This is going to be really resident specific, so get to know your resident so that you can recognize these warning signs as they happen. Stage 3 is the crisis stage. This is mid-behavior. This is where your resident is going to be acting out, and it's really, the goal for this is to get them into stage 4, which is the resolution stage. This is where they start calming down a little bit, where they're going to be a little bit more open to maybe having a conversation with you about what's happening. They're going to be a little bit more rational in this. And that's going to move us into stage 5, which is the debriefing stage. This is where they can maybe have a conversation about why they were upset or what they could have done better. This is going to be coming down even more to then go back to optimal phase where they're in a good mood. For our residents who have high behaviors or behaviors, they're going to have a behavior support plan in their daily books. This is going to be a really good tool for working with your resident. A lot of thought and planning was put into this, so make sure you're referencing this. The top section is going to be what the resident looks like in each of those 5 stages. And it's going to list in stage 2 some of those warning signs, which are going to be really helpful to you. The middle section is the goal of that stage. And then the bottom section is ways staff can interact with that resident to help them move to the next stage, to help them get through the behavior. Some of these are going to be advice for how to speak with your resident or interact with them, things that are going to be helpful, and maybe some hints as to what will not be helpful in dealing with behaviors. So make sure you're referencing this and talk to your RS if you don't understand something on here so you can really have a good understanding of it. This next chart is the same as the graph we looked at. It's just broken down a little bit differently. Instead of stages, we have phases, and they're named a little differently, but it's basically the same thing as the graph. So, moving into our principles of behavior management, the 5 things we're going to look at today to help work through behaviors. Number 1, consistency. Number 2, teamwork. Number 3, be proactive and reactive. Number 4, reflection and training. And number 5, acceptance and tolerance. Like I said before, managing behaviors is not a hard science. It's going to change with each resident, and it's probably going to change behavior to behavior even within that same resident. But what we're going to talk about today is just going to give you a nice foundation of how to deal with behaviors and how to help your residents get through them. So a question for you guys. Would you rather a brand new 2016 Land Rover, it's smooth and quiet, well over 90 miles an hour, has nice heated seats, advanced accident detection, good gas mileage, and it parallel parks itself? Or you could choose the wonderfully rusty 1989 Ford Taurus. It rattles violently at 45 miles an hour. There's no air conditioning, no radio or CD player. It gets a whopping 5 miles to the gallon, and it does not parallel park itself. I think most people would probably choose the 2016 Land Rover because it looks nice and shiny and it's pretty. But what if I told you that the Land Rover only starts 50% of the time? The Taurus starts up every single time. You have to be to work by 8 a.m. each day, and you don't have any other means of transportation. And if you're late to your job, even once, you're fired. I think at this point, most people would change their mind and decide to take the Taurus. And that really brings us into our first principle here, and that's consistency. So if I were to ask you, would you rather write an absolutely brilliant behavior plan that's followed 95% of the time, or write a mediocre behavior plan that's followed 100% of the time, which would you choose? Consistency here is going to be the watchword. Obviously, we strive to write an absolutely brilliant behavior plan that's followed 100% of the time, but that's not always possible. So we're going to write something that's going to be easy for staff to follow and implement so that the resident is getting the same message every single time. Consistency in approach is the single most effective tool in supporting individuals with challenging behaviors.
One of the residents that I've worked with for quite a few years over at that home, really absolutely hates to clean her bedroom. She gets home from work at about 2 o'clock every single day. Can't go out until 5:30 when our third activity staff gets in. So she's got a solid 3.5 hours every day where she really has nothing to do except like that and chat with the staff. Just as principal, she hates cleaning her room. I can really well hate cleaning her bedroom, but I will do. But it's part of her expectation. She needs to keep her bedroom really clean. And she can do this really quickly. It's not so every day. It happens in the rule. It needs to happen before she goes out. So she's got that 3.5 hours to get it done. And when she gets to the hang of doing it, it's really not that bad. Because truthfully, first of all, if you're cleaning your room every single day, you go down there and take all 10 minutes to get it done. And when she finally gets down to her bedroom, she actually discovers that she got a bunch of one-on-one time with the staff that are helping her, and she gets to chat with them, and things go really smoothly, and she really honestly probably enjoys it faster. So it's a good thing for her to connect with the staff. However, she's still got in her mind some fun things to do. And if we go a couple of days where the staff who are working decide not to enforce the expectation that her room gets cleaned, and I know I worked with you yesterday, and I was pretty much just not bothered any today. I and the staff let it go a few days without giving her the expectation of cleaning her bedroom. But she really gets used to this idea. We keep her room, let's do that go, everything's working well. And a few days later, we have a staff come on who, in fact, is going to try to support the guideline, the expectation that says, all right, let's do it your room before I go out. We can literally have an hour and a half of explosive behaviors. You can't make me clean my room. Hey, didn't make me clean my room the next couple of days. Why are you doing this? I hate you. And all of a sudden, we've got one resident's upset, another resident's upset because she's upset, and it's all simply because the staff weren't consistent as far as following the expectations for the resident. The guidelines are very simple as far as what they were doing.
All right, let's pretend that you have to write a college essay. Your professor gives you a rubric of everything that's expected, and you write your paper and you meet all of the expectations. You've gone through and ticked all of the boxes that your professor gives you. You turn in that paper, but it turns out that instead of the professor grading it, the professor's TA grades it, who has a different rubric. And so the TA gives you a C and just write needs improvement without any other explanation. How are you going to feel about that? If I had to guess, you're going to be a little frustrated, disappointed because it's not fair, right? You met all of what you were told to meet, and you still didn't succeed. So it's really important for our residents in the same way that they get the same expectations from every staff, so that they know what's expected of them and so that we can help them succeed. So let's look at a couple areas of behavior management that it's important to be consistent in. Tone and demeanor of staff is a really important one.
The 10-year-old had a pretty interesting behavior. She would put everything in her mouth, mostly to get a reaction out of staff. She really enjoyed it with staff, made a grossed out face, and grossed out sounds. That was a goal of hers, was to see what she could get people to, how she could get people to react. So for tone and demeanor of staff, we tried that first summer to make it our goal to control our tone and demeanor so that we would minimize her reaction whenever she did something to try to get a response from us. So one day, a staff took her to the park. She's a 10-year-old girl, so she loves to play on the playground equipment. And she made her way over towards the parking lot area. And when she got over there, she picked up a dead animal, put it in her mouth. And anybody else you would encounter, if you saw them do that, you would make gross out sounds. You would go, oh, gross, be really disgusted. But because it was our goal to make sure that we were giving her minimal response, the staff person just redirected her, didn't call any attention to it, just said, okay, we're going back over to the playground area, we can go on the swings, I can give you a push, you've got a few more minutes here at the park, and just calmly handle the situation. Then the staff got back to the house, where I was the RS, and quietly said to me around the corner, I'm having to brush your teeth, but she put a dead animal in the park. So that was good too, because she kept it all under wraps, so I didn't know we were talking about it, and didn't know I had gotten any kind of response from staff at all.
So a couple other areas where it's really important to be consistent is feedback given to a resident before, during, and after a behavior. This is important so that the resident knows what is expected of them and they learn how to respond appropriately. So it's really important that from staff to staff we're consistent in this. There could be some variables in how we respond from resident to resident and what is most appropriate and most helpful for them. So make sure you have in mind what resident you are working with in a certain behavior. Another area is how we implement behavior plans and positive support transition plans. Always follow these plans. It's really important that every staff is on board and knows how to implement these plans. So if you have any questions, please talk to your supervisor. Other areas where it's important to be consistent is a reward system. If that's appropriate, we want our residents to know how they earn rewards and how they need to be successful in order to gain those. Also, documenting and behavior charting. It's important that it's accurate. We take that information with us to psychiatrist appointments. So it's really important that we're being thorough and that you know how you're documenting a specific behavior. And then thirdly, what defines a target behavior and what constitutes as a warning. Make sure you're looking at your residents' behavior plans and their behavior charting so that you know specifically what constitutes for that behavior. It could change resident to resident, even if it's the same behavior.
We had kind of a tough morning. Sometimes it can be difficult for her on weekends if she doesn't have something very fun planned for later on in the day. So that day we had in her plan her iPad, something she loves to do. But she had such a difficult morning, she had to have a couple other interventions with her positive support transition plan. And it didn't seem safe for the iPad to have that happen just next after that. So one important thing when it comes to behaviors and consistency is knowing for your resident when is the best point in the behavioral cycle for you to bring up if someone is going to have to earn back a privilege. So in this case, what happened was we don't want the iPad to get broken. It's very difficult during the behavior or even just before the behavior for her to talk about having to earn the iPad back later. It usually goes a lot better if we get to the very end of the behavior, and at that point we can talk about it and say, I can tell you're having a difficult time still. Let's move up some of your other activities, and then you can earn your iPad back. And at that point, she's able to work her way through other activities to get there. Now that can be compared to a different resident, and just, you know, it can be different resident to resident. A guy named, who used to live at, he would get really upset with staff, and he would threaten to have a behavior, and a staff person could say to him before he escalated, "Oh, remember, you have coffee tonight, we're going out, but if you have a behavior, you'll have to earn that back." And he could say, oh, that's fine, I'll stop, I'm good, and not have the behavior in that instant, because he wants to go to coffee so much that he can stop before he even escalates. So it can be very different from resident to resident, and you want to get to know what's most effective for your resident for consistency.
Consistency cannot exist without effective and reliable teamwork. And this segues us into principle number 2, which is teamwork. If you know anything about basketball, you know that if you have most of the team running in one direction trying to score a basket, and you have one person running in the opposite direction just doing circles around the other basket, that person is not going to be helpful at all. And if they're a part of a play that's being run, they're actually going to be detrimental to the team. So it's really important that as staff, everybody's on the same page, that we all are running in the same direction, and it's really important that everybody knows how to both run the offense and the defense. And by that, I mean everybody knows how to both help manage a behavior, and then defensively, what's going on if one of your coworkers is dealing with that behavior? Maybe another resident needs help going to the bathroom. Maybe you need to step in and help make dinner. Something like that, so that the rest of the house can keep moving on, and you can be a support to that staff who's managing behaviors. So we're going to look at what teamwork looks like in regards to managing challenging behaviors. Everybody needs to know how to run the offense and defense, like I said, and we need to be able to help each other out and kind of incorporate a tag team mentality into our time on shift.
They were willing to admit they in fact watched professional wrestling at some point in their life, right? If you want to. If you haven't watched professional wrestling, I am sure it's probably in your bucket list. You're really anxious to do it, I would imagine. I have to tell you, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert right now. There is a certain match called a tag team match. And I'm going to tell you how it goes. I used to watch professional wrestling when I was like 8 or 9. I just saw it on TV a few months ago, and it's the exact same thing. But there's about 20 years difference between there and that. And so it's all happening the exact same way that happened when I was 8 or 9 years old. So this is exactly how it goes in tag team wrestling. You have 2 guys against 2 guys. But only one person from each team can be in the ring at one time. So there's one against one in the ring. In the meantime, the tag team partner stands in the corner, and they can't come into the ring and wrestle until they get tagged in by their partner. So the match always starts, they're a little bit back and forth, and they tag in once or twice, and both guys are involved until finally one team gains the upper hand. And you've got at least 10 minutes of this one guy just getting pummeled. The guy who's in the ring with him is beating him up, and he tags out, and they double team him a little bit, and the new guy beats him up, and then they tag back in, and there's another couple double teams. And in the meantime, you got his partner standing in the corner shaking the ropes. Come on, tag me, I'm ready to come in. He's got all this energy built up, and he wants to help, but he just can't because the partner can't tag him. Just when you're absolutely convinced that the poor guy's going to beat up for 15 minutes, the match is over, he's definitely going to lose. He gets this last surge of energy, he lunges into the corner, and he tags his partner, who jumps into the ring. He's got all this pent up aggression, and he totally cleans house, and that team then always wins the match. Anybody who watched professional wrestling can raise their hand now. I agree with you. That's exactly how it goes, right? Certainly within ACR, we are clearly not having a wrestling match with our residents. We're looking to keep them safe, but it can be really difficult being that person in the ring. So maybe you came into work already a little bit tired, right? It was just finals week, you're exhausted, you're pretty sure you didn't do that well, finally you just took, and you're just tired. And of course you're working with residents, having a really hard night, having a lot of behaviors, and it does not take you very long to get exhausted and for the resident really to have the upper hand. Really important that you are not afraid to reach your hand out and tag in the corner to your staff that you're working with and say, this is going to be a long shift. I just need a half an hour break. Would you mind asking me to or you just tag out. And if you're the staff standing in the corner and you're seeing this happen, and you can notice that the resident that they're working with is having a really hard night, you can tell they're getting tired, and you imagine it's probably getting to be a long shift, don't be afraid to extend your hand out there and say, look, I know, doing your entry running this evening, can I help you right away? Volunteer to do something. So this is an important part of working together as a tag team, working, supporting each other as staff. It's just making sure that we're pitching in and supporting one another when we need that. Because there's nothing wrong with being in that position when you need a break. It's just the reality. Definitely some challenges come with every job. One of the challenges you have when you're working at ACR with people with disabilities is sometimes you can get tired. There's nothing wrong with that. We'd much rather have you reach out and ask for some help than get worn out.
So don't be afraid to ask for some help, and don't be afraid to offer help if you see a coworker who is struggling or having a rough night. So it's really important that all staff are on board with the plan, that they know what's happening and they know what their part of the job is. So if a resident were going to do an insulin scan, that means having 3 weeks of a really strict diet. So it's really important that all staff know what is on that diet plan and what the resident can eat. Because if one person accidentally gives the resident something that they're not allowed to have, then that diet scan, or the insulin scan, is going to have to start all the way over, and that resident is going to be on that strict diet for even longer. It's also really important that everybody has a comprehensive understanding of the step-by-step behavior plan. If we don't understand the plans, then it's going to be hard/impossible to implement them well to help our residents succeed. And then thirdly, it's really important that there's good, consistent, open communication between everybody, between staff and the resident, between staff and other staff at the house, between your supervisors and the guardians, that everybody's on board. Staff meetings are going to be really key for this. It's a time that you can get more staff together than you're ever going to see on shift, and everybody can talk about how things have been going. If there's a new behavior, you can discuss what's been working, what hasn't been working, and you can really get everybody on board to help that resident be successful. It's important that we give residents consistent feedback, and so that doesn't vary staff to staff. And your RS is really going to be the piece that holds us together. And maybe they'll give you even like a word-perfect response, so that when a resident has this behavior, this is how staff respond. Just another way that we can be consistent so our resident knows what's acceptable and what is not. And for our residents, it can be really beneficial to have a daily schedule. Maybe that's a checklist of things or a little calendar of pictures that they can follow along with, so that they know what's happening next. And this is going to help them when maybe they don't process time as well, so that they can know, all right, I did this, now we're going to go this, and that consistency is going to help them with their behaviors. An ounce of prevention is better than 1,000 pounds of cure, but a cure is better than nothing. And this brings us to principle number 3, which is be proactive and reactive. So let's pretend that it is the first day of summer break. You've had an early class all semester and you just wrapped up, and you are looking forward to going home, sleeping. You have nothing planned for the next day other than maybe staying in your pajamas all day and watching Netflix for 7 hours. But, much to your chagrin, you are woken up super early by a bright light shining in your window. So, there's going to be 2 responses that you have. Your first response is going to be your reactive response. What can you do in this moment, right now, to go back to sleep? Maybe for some people that's just pulling the blanket up over their head and rolling the other way. Other people, maybe if you have blinds, you can close them, but if there are no blinds there, you're going to be taping a blanket over the window or whatever you can do to get back to sleep, because you have no intention of being up at 5:30 in the morning on a day where you have nothing planned. But the next step is going to be your proactive response. What can you do so that tomorrow morning you don't get woken up at the same time? You know, maybe you drive to Target and you buy some curtains so you can put them up some nice blackout curtains, keep it nice and dark in your room. Two different responses there. The reactive part, what did you do in that moment to fix the problem? And the proactive, what did you do to prevent it from happening again?
When it comes to reactive behavior management techniques, one thing that you can do is notice or look for behavior patterns. So for some of our residents, it can be a huge challenge the day after their birthday or the day after Christmas, for example. Birthdays and Christmas are really exciting, wonderful days, and then it's all over, and they have to wait a whole year before the really fun thing comes around again. So one thing you could possibly do when you notice this pattern for a resident is try to do some fun things right after the birthday or right after Christmas, so it's not like all the fun drops off that day. So for example, maybe the day after Christmas you go to the Mall of America and ride a ride, and the day after that you take the resident out to lunch with their mom, and the day after that you get to go to a movie. And that way that person has a little time to do some fun things after their really fun holiday to get excited about.
So another part of this is paying attention to resident cues so that we can pick up on when they're going through something that maybe they're not able to communicate with us.
Two of the residents were gone. It was a weekend. Two residents were gone with their families. And so we actually had 3 male staff on, and just 2 residents home. And one of the residents actually had some chores to do, cleaning his bedroom. So there's 3 staff and 1 resident, and they're all kind of looking around on this beautiful summer day saying, what do we want to do? Why don't we go play croquet? And so the resident was really excited about it. It was a great decision. It was a really appropriate choice to make. The resident liked to do it. The staff were excited about it. So they got croquet set up and they're going at it. Well, what occasionally can happen with your typical big stuff college male staff is they can get a little bit competitive, right? And so they were all focused on that croquet match. It was all about not who's winning croquet so I can have bragging rights for the rest of the shift. And so while they were all playing croquet and really focused on it, the resident, who in fact had been cleaning his room, got done. He really enjoyed going on bike rides. And so just when he was done with his room, he went right out to the garage, got his helmet on, he got his bike, and he just walked it out to the driveway, and he stood there. And he watched while 3 staff spent all their attention on his one housemate, one resident. He waited for 5 minutes. He waited there for 10 minutes while they all just kept playing croquet. And about 15 minutes later, he finally had enough. The resident slammed down his bike, took off his helmet, threw it across the yard, marched out in the middle of the croquet match, picked up a mouse, snapped it over his leg, grabbed the ball, threw it against the house, and said, "Can't you see I want to go on a bike ride?" It would have been really great if he would have just raised his hand and said, "Please, could somebody take me on a bike ride?" Our residents aren't really going to do that. Instead, I would submit to you probably that one of the 3 staff who was so focused on the croquet game is a little more proactive, recognizes the very obvious signs of the resident standing there with his bike around, and so teach you guys on the step up and take the resident on the bike ride instead.
It's really great to be involved with our residents and doing activities with them. Just make sure you're paying attention to what else is happening at the house. This behavior would have been very easily avoided if one of those 3 staff had noticed that the resident got done cleaning his room and he wanted to go on a bike ride. So just make sure you are keeping in mind everybody who's home and paying attention to those resident cues. All right, imagine with me again, you are done with your sleep-in week after finals, and now you're going to go on a road trip with your friends. You've got 4 other people, you're packed in a car, and you're headed out to visit a friend. You realize that you have to go to the bathroom, and there are no exit signs in sight. How do you feel? I'm guessing you feel a little anxious, probably uncomfortable, and wishing you hadn't have just guzzled that Mountain Dew 20 minutes ago. But imagine with me now, you see this sign. It says rest area, the next one's closed, and the next one after that is for 74 miles. How do you feel now? Probably panicking a little bit. If you'll notice, there are no trees on the side of this road. It's wide open. There's no place to really conceal yourself. You're probably feeling really uncomfortable and maybe considering things you wouldn't in a normal frame of mind. But, okay, pretend the last slide was a joke, and instead of waiting 74 miles, you have just 15 until your next exit. How do you feel now? A little relieved? This is actually a scientific principle. It's called tolerance for delay. It's the idea that We can handle things if we know the end. If we know when something is going to end or how long we have to do something, it's a lot easier for us to handle this. I had an old boss that used to joke that she could do anything for a set amount of time if she knew when that weird time would end. This can be really hard for our residents if they don't have a good concept of time. If you tell them, we're going to go out to eat, but we're not going to do it for another hour, that can be really hard to grasp. So things like visual timers or schedules can be really beneficial for our residents. If they have a schedule like this, maybe they really are looking forward to going out to eat, but they have to do a couple things beforehand. They have to pick up their room and maybe take their bath or start their laundry. A chart like this can be helpful so then every time they finish something, they can color it in or put a sticker in it so they see the progress towards that goal that they're looking for. This can help them process time moving without actually having to know what 20 minutes feels like. And you can do this same thing if it's just time. You could write 30 minutes in one box, 25, 20, 15, and so on, and just color it in or put a sticker in as every 5 minutes pass or 10 minutes. Did you ever get moved in school? You were talking too much to your best friend and your teacher made you sit somewhere else? Do you know why she did this? It's to take away the distraction and that temptation to just talk all day. So she was reactive in moving you away from your best friend to a seat next to maybe somebody you didn't get along with very well, or maybe it was a seat all on your own over in the corner. But if I had to guess, she's going to be proactive the next time she does a seating chart, and you're probably not going to be able to sit next to your best friend again. But she's trying to eliminate that temptation, and we can use this same principle with our residents. So we're going to look at what it means to be proactive in managing challenging behaviors and what it means to be reactive.
Another important thing that you can do to be proactive is to be positive and be present right away when you're greeting your residents when you're coming on shift. There was a resident at one house who some days she would come off her day program vehicle. She'd be in a great mood, come in the house and engage with staff right away and have a good night. Other days she'd come off the day program vehicle, come into the house, kind of sullen, not really interacting with anybody, would sometimes beeline it to her room, and there she'd stay in a pretty bad mood, and then come out eventually for dinner and be in a bad mood all night and try to instigate things with other residents. And so the staff wanted to try to improve the situation and make it easier for her to kind of get back into the house and have a good night. So they started being positive and being present with her right away. What they did is they went out and met her at the day program vehicle, and they made sure they had a plan. They had an idea of what they were going to say to her to get her engaged. So one night it might be, oh, I'm so glad you're home. Tonight's your night to help prep dinner. Or it might be, oh, I'm so glad you're home. Tonight we're going to the YMCA. I'm going to race you in the pool. We're going to swim as hard as we can. And that would get her going too. So those things, once staff started engaging her with her right away, would make her very happy. And staff even would get creative with nights in. So they would make sure maybe that it was her favorite staff who was coming up to greet her at the vehicle, and they would say, hey, we're having a wonderful girls' night in. You get to pick the movie out, and we're going to have some popcorn, and you can put your pajamas on right after dinner. How's about that? And she would love that. That would make her very pleased.
Let's look at a couple other ways that we can be proactive. The most important thing is to know your resident. Know their likes and dislikes and how they like to spend their days. Another thing we can do is know their diagnosis. I don't know if you guys know this, but people with autism can see flickering in fluorescent lights, and that can be really hard for them and really annoying. So know little things like that about your resident. People with autism also really like pressure, and so things like weighted blankets or a weight vest could be really helpful to get them through if they're having a rough day. Another thing we can do is engage with the residents sufficiently and appropriately. Know if your resident wants interaction right when they get home, or maybe they want to take a nap first. differences like that. Utilize adaptive equipment. Talk to your supervisor about this. Those weighted blankets and the weight vests and stuff like that could be really helpful. Make sure you utilize your resources. This plays into asking questions, learning about your residents, and maybe seeking some advice if your resident has a new diagnosis or starts having a new behavior. We can ask questions and help get some more information so that we can deal with that more efficiently. And maybe use visual timers or schedules to help your residents process time if they're having a hard time waiting for something to happen. Another schedule or checklist that you could use is something like this. Maybe your residents really love going to day program, but they don't like getting out of bed or showering or brushing their teeth. So you could do something like this, and each time they complete the task, put a sticker in there, and they can see that they're getting close to being able to go. Or maybe you have a resident who just really likes keeping track of things. Then they can sign on their own every time they do something. And then this can also kind of be a buffer so that you can blame the schedule instead of it being you telling the resident that they have to brush their teeth. Oh, I'm so sorry, but your morning checklist says we have to brush our teeth and get dressed before we can have breakfast, so let's go do that.
Another way you want to think about being proactive can apply to when you take a resident on an outing. Certain kind of outings are going to be very fun. The outing itself is going to be exciting enough for the person. Other ones are a little less fun, like doctor's appointments. In particular, it tends to be when you go to doctor's appointments, you have to wait a while before you get in to see the doctor. For many of our residents, that can be a challenge. So things you want to look out for in that situation are any potential triggers in the waiting room. So an example of that might be, let's say somebody's got some delicious looking food, maybe they're eating a sub sandwich, and that can be really difficult for some residents to sit next to somebody who's eating. So that person might not do so great staying in the waiting room and might need to go out and walk about. One possibility is to walk up to the person who's calling people back and say, my person in Heroic needs to go on a little walk. Here's my cell phone number, call me and we'll come right back in. And then just go walk the halls of the facility for a bit. Another thing you want to consider is bringing something along that's fun for the person to do while they're sitting in the waiting. So if someone has an iPad or if someone really likes magazines or coloring, that would be a good thing to bring along so the person has something interesting to do while they're waiting.
Some more proactive techniques. Play out all the possibilities. Do the what if game in your head and just run through your day so that you have an option for things and kind of come up with a plan B if things aren't going well. Also, non-contingent one-on-one time is really important. Many of our residents came from institutions or other homes where they would get their meds and their meals every day and maybe a shower once a week. And that was the extent of one-on-one time they had with staff. So they learned that behaviors would get them additional interaction, and they learned to have outbursts and behaviors to get that one-on-one time with staff. However, all of our residents should be getting at least 15 minutes of one-on-one time every 4 hours. And that's non-contingent, so it's not during a care or a med pass or a meal, and they get this regardless of how their day is going. So even if they're having a rough day, they still get this. This isn't something that we ever want to take away from our residents in reaction to how they're behaving. Don't take behaviors personally. Remember, a resident is not out to get you, that behaviors are just a part of their disability. Be creative. If we can just make our residents laugh and lighten the mood, that's going to go a really long way in how our night is going at the homes. So be silly, be funny, put on some music, dance around, and think of something new. Try something that you haven't done before with a resident. And also, provide the residents with a perceived choice. This can be really important to residents who feel like maybe their whole day is scheduled by somebody else. So if they're having a hard time getting through their daily routine, give them a choice between two things that they have to do. And maybe ask them, Would you rather fold your laundry first, or would you rather take a bath first? And if you notice how I worded that, I didn't say one or the other. They still have to do both things, but then they get to choose what they do first. And that's going to give them some pride in their schedule and that they get to choose what they do. So, different diagnoses that can cause resident behaviors. Dementia is one that you might get unusual behaviors sporadically that can be a warning sign or an early sign of dementia. Autism is another one that environmental factors are going to play into this, and adaptive equipment can be really key. So if you have residents at your homes with either of these diagnoses, look into this a little bit more and see what you're doing with them to help them be successful in their day. Notice and look for behavior patterns. If you notice that a resident always has a behavior when one thing happens, then see if you can be proactive and keep that thing from happening. Maybe one resident's behavior sets off another resident. So if a resident starts having a behavior, take that other resident and move them to a different room in the house or engage them in a different activity so they don't focus on that other resident having a behavior. And this is all going to go into a bag of tricks and give you things to help you deal with behaviors, things that you can pull out on a moment's notice. And maybe this will change a little bit over time as resident behaviors change, but it's just kind of a database of things that you can do.
Really big football fan. Really loves the Vikings because she's from Minnesota here. She also really loves the Packers because the Packers are our neighbors. You're supposed to be nice to your neighbors. And so generally speaking, anytime she's going to make a decision on who she's cheering for in any sporting event, Minnesota, and then whoever is geographically closest to Minnesota. But because she's such a big football fan, the Super Bowl is a really big deal. Like she knows this is the culmination of everything she's been paying attention to for this whole season long, and she is really excited about the Super Bowl now. She also used to be absolutely terrible at picking the team that she wanted to win. She always got it wrong. And unfortunately, she couldn't deal with that very well. So she would have all this anxiety built about the Super Bowl. And when it came time to decide who she was going to cheer for, she would get really mad because she always picked the wrong team. And it was an absolute guarantee in her life that she was going to have very violent behaviors on Super Bowl Sunday. Herself and the supervisors were literally arm wrestle or flip a coin or something to figure out who had to get a call on Super Bowl Sunday because it was a guarantee you're getting called at about 8 o'clock at night to go in and deal with some explosive behaviors that she was just that upset about the football season being over with, and in most cases picking on TV. So we had this happen, and we always knew it was going to happen. And so finally we had this newer staff who developed this fantastic idea. So it was the year that the Colts and the Saints were going to play each other in the Super Bowl. And she was going back and forth, the Colts and the Saints, and she couldn't really decide who she wanted to cheer for. And so finally this happened. Politics will make a banner that says Go Colts. I'll make a banner that says Go Saints. And in the midst of the Super Bowl, I was looking, anytime the Colts scored in their game, she would pick up the banner and say, yeah, Go Colts, I want them to win. And if the Saints pulled ahead, she'd grab her Saints banner, yeah, Go Saints, I'm cheering for the Saints. And she just became the ultimate bandwagon jumper. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So at the end of the game, the Saints were winning, and she had her Saints banner in her hand. Yeah, I want the Saints to win the whole time. And she was really excited about it. And so that, along with some other changes, positive changes too that we'll make in her life, Super Bowl's not a problem at all. Now, Super Bowl parties, they can invite other people over, or before you have pizza, she can deal with it so much better just because of development and bag of tricks on how to help her calm down a little bit about it.
All right, let's now look at some reactive ways that we can help manage behaviors. Be flexible. It's good for our residents to have a schedule, but as we all know, days don't always happen how we plan them. So if we can be flexible and just kind of roll with it, that's going to help our residents go with it. They're going to take their cues from you. So if you're stressed out about not being able to do something or about having to change the routine, they're going to be stressed out too. And adversely, if you can just laugh something off and roll with it and be excited about a new plan, then your residents are maybe going to be able to do that as well. We can also adjust and adapt the physical environment. Maybe that means turning some bright lights off and just turning the lamp on in the corner, or turning the heat down, something like that. So let's look at an example to help us kind of get this in our frame of mind. So imagine you're at a Thanksgiving dinner with your family. Everybody's being really loud. You have the guys in the living room watching football. The kids are running around playing a game. It's really hot in there because the ovens have been on, and you have a headache. So what can we do to adapt that environment so that you're more comfortable? Maybe you could turn the heat down or open a window, get some fresh air. Maybe you just need to take 5 minutes and go upstairs to one of the bedrooms and just give yourself a little bit of downtime. Lay down on the bed, take a nap. Maybe you could have the kids go outside and play to get rid of some of that noise. Maybe you could ask the guys in the living room to turn the TV down a little bit or to be a little bit quieter. It probably wouldn't work with my family, but just tell them you have a headache. Maybe you could take some Advil or go sit with your grandma who's just quietly sipping tea or something like that. So there's a lot that we could do short of just leaving Thanksgiving to help us be able to get through that day a little bit easier. So this brings us to principle number 4, which is reflection and training. It's impossible to have consistency, evaluate our teamwork, or discover proactive techniques if we don't reflect on the past experiences and evaluate them effectively. Staff must reflect on experiences with resident behaviors in order to improve their abilities. So, how do we practice reflection in our homes? We should be reflecting after each behavior and running through, how did I react? Could I have done something differently? Maybe could I have done something a little bit better? We should also be doing this at staff meetings, talking in big groups about how things are going, what's working, what's not. This is really important so that we can learn and adapt better. If we don't ever look at how we're dealing with behaviors, then we're not going to get any better at it. So when we're reflecting, we can use this ABC questions. The antecedent, what caused the resident to have the behavior? What was that spark? The behavior, what did it look like? How did we respond? Is this something we've seen before from the resident, or is this a new behavior? And then consequence. Did we respond appropriately? Did they lose a reward if they were supposed to? Maybe did we intercede too quickly? Did your resident just need a little bit more time to process something on their own? Or did we not intercede quickly enough? Did we let them get too built up before we stepped in? So look at the consequences for both your resident and for the house as a whole. If we can recognize the causes and triggers of behaviors, this is going to help us be more proactive in the future. And unfortunately, sometimes it's a lot easier to see those causes after the fact. But if we don't reflect on it, then we're not going to think about those triggers. And this can also help us develop a plan for the future, maybe to change the environment, or if it's a new behavior, just to give us an idea of what to do if it happens again. This can also help us recognize maybe underlying diagnoses that haven't been properly addressed. We're with our residents 24/7, so we see a lot more than their doctors do. And we're going to pick up on things faster. Say, maybe if your resident is starting to develop dementia, we're going to see those warning signs a lot earlier than their doctor is going to diagnose it. So pay attention to those behaviors that come up and are really out of the ordinary, and make sure you're talking to your supervisor about this. And as we reflect, it's also going to add to our bag of tricks. If we can talk to other staff at the house who, if a behavior happens, they have that one thing that always works for them, let's share that with other staff so that we can all be successful in managing behaviors.
Her sister was her guardian, and so we were having, she in fact started experiencing dementia, and we weren't aware of it really. And all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, she stopped sleeping in bed. She started to refuse to go to her bedroom to sleep. And so she'd sleep on the couch, she'd fall asleep in the kitchen chair, she'd sleep in the hallway, she'd fall asleep in the bathroom floor even. But we just absolutely could not get her to walk down to her bedroom to sleep at it. And so we tried all these different ideas of things we could do to coax her down there, and it was right around the time she was having her annual meeting. Her sister was there, and at that point in life, her sister used to take her home for weekends once every couple months. She goes stay with her sister and have good weekend time. And so her sister, as we're talking about this, said, "Oh well, you give her a bowl of popcorn at that time." And we were like, "What? No, you don't give her popcorn?" "Oh yeah, when she stays at my house, we pop up a little bowl of popcorn and I put it down in her bed, and she gets her jammies on and walks right down there and munches her popcorn right before she falls asleep." And so we said, "Sure, we'll give the popcorn a try." So we pop up a little bowl of popcorn, and for the next 6 years of her life, this resident had popcorn in bed, and she slept in bed without any problems until dementia had progressed a little bit more. So I have good things that popcorn fixes everything.
It's really important here that the staff asked questions, because I'm willing to bet there is no medical professional on earth that says, "Oh, a resident won't go to sleep in their bed, give them some popcorn." It's not something that a doctor is going to be able to connect to. And it's probably not something that we're going to be able to trial and error and figure out. But the staff here were able to ask questions to that resident's team and get an answer that worked, and then that resident could sleep in bed instead of falling asleep on the bathroom floor. So the most important thing that reflection allows us to do is to know when we need to ask for help. This brings us all the way back to the beginning, and the most important thing that you can do for your residents is to know when to ask for help. ACR hires a great staff, and we know that you guys are awesome, but nobody's going to have the right answer for every situation at every turn. So it's really important that you know when to add other people to the discussion. Asking questions and asking for help is the most important action that an employee can take, and it's absolutely necessary to create the best possible plan of care. So how can we practice reflection as ACR employees who deal with challenging behaviors? After every behavior, it's important to reflect. This could be done just a little conversation in your head, or talk to other staff that were there working who saw the behavior, How do you think I reacted? Is there anything you would have done differently? And it's also really important for us to do this as a full staff with your RS, so that we can be seeing different sides of behaviors. If you're somebody who likes to process through writing things down, talk to your supervisor, and we have a behavior management reflection form that can really help you do this as well. And make sure we're discussing all successes and failures and mistakes with all of your staff in your RS. If you had a time where you were dealing with a behavior and you tried something that absolutely just did not work and backfired on you, it's important to share that so other staff don't have to go through trying that and having it fail, so that we can be successful in the future and learn from our mistakes. Okay, so let's think back to that first video that we watched of the little boy in the supermarket. What could that dad have done to handle that behavior better? Well, seeing as he didn't really do anything, there are a lot of things he could have done better. Maybe going into it, he could have told his son, "Okay, well, we can pick one treat before we leave." Or maybe he could have given the son a perceived choice and picked out a couple things that he was okay with the boy taking home. Maybe some dried fruit or some applesauce or something like that, and give the boy a choice. Maybe he could have just avoided the candy aisle altogether, and that could have solved things as well. So think through what you can do, play out all the scenarios in your head as you're going into the community and days with your residents. I don't know if you guys have ever read this before, but it's a little poem. It goes, "Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." This brings us into our last principle, number 5, acceptance and tolerance. There are going to be days, every once in a while, if you're at a behavior house, where you might look like this at the end of your shift. And if we can just accept that as a part of our reality, it's going to make things a lot easier to deal with. We understand that frustration can be a part of our job. Working with people with disabilities can be challenging, and there are going to be days where you're a little bit frustrated. Hopefully you don't ever get to this point. I would hate to see somebody try and bring a bat over their knee. If I had to guess, it hurts. But make sure you're talking to your RS if you're getting really overly frustrated. or if you're really disappointed in yourself and how you're dealing with things and you doubt that you can do this, talk to your RS or maybe your PD so that we can help work through this together.
The gentleman who works in the office here actually grew up on a farm. So he and his brother got a terrible task one summer of putting up a fence in the swampy areas of their farm. You've been in Minnesota long enough, you've probably experienced a mosquito, and you know how terrible they are. And so, beginning of August, super hot, super humid, but they still had to dress up in pants and long sleeves because they knew the bugs were going to be terrible up there. So here they are in the swamp, put up a fence, they're totally covered in bug spray, everything they could possibly do to stop the mosquitoes. And of course, it's still not working because the swamp has mosquitoes breeding ground and it's just not working well. So all this hard work and they're sweating, and the brother of the ACR staff here finally got so frustrated with one mosquito that just kept dive bombing his ear and kept going after him, he just couldn't get rid of it. And he finally got so frustrated, he slammed his shovel down and he grabbed the bug spray, the bug spray, and picked it up, and he found the one mosquito that had just been dive bombing. He just started to unload on this mosquito. Entire can of bug spray, unloading the mosquito, while it's flying around, the mosquito swings around and lands right on his nose, and he sprayed himself in the eye with the bug spray. So, we understand that you get a little frustrated, but I promise you that if you act out on the frustration, nothing good is going to come of it, and you're simply going to get a bunch of bug spray in your eyes.
So, acceptance is the attitude that we ask you to have. And it's really just being able to acknowledge the fact that behaviors are going to happen. We can't stop them from happening, but if we can just kind of have that acceptance and that attitude that this is a part of our life, then it's going to help us be more tolerant. And tolerant is an action. It's how we react to behaviors. It's how we respond to residents when they're having a rough day. And it's really important to be tolerant so that our residents know that this is just a part of who they are, and it's not something that we can't be angry with them for something that they can't control. So we should be displaying this as staff every day in how we're responding to residents and how we're interacting with them in their good days and in their bad. Just accept that behaviors will occur. That's why residents live in a group home. It's part of their diagnosis, and it's part of who they are. And we really want to value them for who they are and show that to them. So just know that if you're trying everything you can, behaviors are still going to happen. And it's not a reflection on your abilities or how well you're trying. It's just a part of our reality here. So try and be prepared for the unexpected.
He came to the house as 11 years old and was about this tall. And then by the time when it was time for him to move out, he was 19 or 20. He was about this tall and really big and really strong, and he was really, really smart. And so he was a really fun guy to work with. He was great to interact with and enjoyed life. And when he got really upset, he was the reason really that the home needed 3 big strong staff people. Because when he got really upset, it often went to some sort of restraint to keep people safe because he get really violent. And he got very strong. It took at least 3, sometimes 4 full-grown men to keep him down and keep him calm. And so we had one night where things were not going well, and so he was being restrained, and the RS had come up from downstairs, was helping with their restraint as well. And so it was a really long process and very intense. However, once he got to that point where he had calmed down, he was always very remorseful. He apologized, and he was always found that at that point very tired, and so he would apologize. When they finally got to that point, the restraint was over, he stood up and said he was sorry. He said, okay, well, get ready for bed, and we'll see that. And so he went off to get ready for bed, and the staff and the RS were all standing around talking about what had happened. And they were all reflecting and kind of making sure everybody was okay, and if anything got scratched really badly, or make sure that they were all on the same page of how it was on. Before they know it, the resident comes marching out again into the middle of their kitchen and said, "Restrain me!" And this was a very abnormal behavior. Once he was done, he apologized, and he was ready to go. He gets some food. And so I said, calm down, you did a great job, we're done with this now, we're not going to get restrained anymore. But you really want to get restrained? No, restrain me!
the RS, "No, you did a really good job here. We're done with this. We definitely don't need your restraining any longer." But he was really intent on getting restrained. Of course, he knew what he needed to do to get restrained. So he restrained me and started pushing the staff and get really aggressive again. And so, sure enough, they had to do another restraint. Well, in the bathroom, the resident had found a big tub of Vaseline. And he had totally covered his entire body in Vaseline. And he was just really excited to see what they were going to do about restraining him while they were slipping and sliding around all over the place with Vaseline all over him. And so it wasn't a fun rest of the night, but now it is a really good story to tell. And obviously, from that point forward, reactively, we removed all the Vaseline from the bathroom, and the lotion like that was no longer accessible to him to prevent it from happening again. It did actually backfire on him a little bit, because I worked with him about a year after he had done that, and somehow he found some lotion in the bathroom again, and he was upset. And so he put lotion all over himself, and he was going to do the whole restraint thing again, but he changed his mind and decided instead that he wanted to run away. And so he went over to the door to try to get out of the house, and his hand was also in motion, so he couldn't actually open the door. So it backfired over time. But just be prepared for the unexpected. That way you won't be too shocked when those things come up.
Expect behaviors to occur, and then you won't overact when they do. Acceptance and tolerance will increase your ability to remain positive, which is extremely important when dealing with behavior-prone clients.
Really unfortunate situation that happened with NACR a few years ago. There was an RS who was working at a behavior home, actually knew her, and she did a lot of really good things for her residents when she was working there. But she had burned out, and she just didn't recognize that she had already gotten burned out. And so she was working with a resident with behavior, but with wheelchair bound. It was the middle of January. She was actually working with a brand new staff who was supposed to be shadowing her, so that kind of gives you an idea of how burned out she was when you hear the rest of the story. But she had this client who was wheelchair bound and in his pajamas for the night, which for him meant a pair of briefs and like an A-frame t-shirt. They sent his pajamas. And he had some behaviors, and she was really frustrated with it. And rather than escorting him back to his room like was appropriate, she decided that he might cool off a little better by bringing him outside and leaving him outside, which in the middle of January, Minnesota is clearly not a safe environment for him to be dressed like that. And so, obviously, Mary just figured out what had happened. She was appropriately convicted of abuse of a lawful adult, and now, unfortunately, for the rest of her life, she's on the blacklist of services and will no longer ever be allowed to work in a daycare or in a nursing home or a church or anywhere that any vulnerable adult attempts to conditions, that she's been eliminated forever working a job like that again. So it's certainly not something we're proud of happened at ACR, and most definitely not something we want to have happen again. It's clearly horrific for the resident, and something we want to make sure is never occurs under our watch again. So we share that story just so that you can be prepared to talk to somebody if you need to. So a few warning signs of intolerance: if you would take your behavior personally, you need to start to really be absolutely convinced that this resident is out to get you. No matter what you do, they're mad at you, and you just can't handle it, and you think that the resident really doesn't like you. You definitely want to talk to somebody. You see the sign yourself, good, if you want to talk to somebody. Yeah, the story I just told you was actually an RS. So if you start to see these signs on other staff or even your supervisor, then you need to talk to someone, to their supervisor, or just let them know that there's much rather be intercepted before something bad happens. So start to take behavior personally. If you ever start to actually get angry, if you're literally angry with somebody with disabilities, that's a bad spot to be in. So if you recognize that in yourself, you definitely want to talk to somebody. Excessive frustration. Again, frustration is part of every job and just part of life. But if you really start to get excessively frustrated to the point where you're leaving work for the night and you're home and you can't fall asleep because you just keep thinking about what happened and it's affecting all of your life and you're so frustrated about it, it's just over the top, that can be a sign that intolerance is just kind of around the corner. Unrealistic expectations. If you're just really stressed out, it's a really busy shift. You know this resident you're working with just doesn't quite have the motor skills to feed themselves, but it's just really helpful tonight if you just feed yourself, because I've got to deal with other behaviors and start to force these unrealistic expectations on residents that you know it's not fair to expect that of them. And then certainly you can start to blame residents for behaviors. Especially keep in mind that this is part of the resident's disability, so they're not their fault. It's not really a choice that they're making to be mean and cruel. So if you find yourself in that position, before you see anybody else who actually identify those things, you definitely want to talk to somebody. You guys maybe don't know this as brand new hires, but less than 10% of the people that actually apply at ACR get hired. They're in the position that you're in right now. So the fact is, you are really good people that would want to be a part of our company. Hopefully, you want to be working for us, since you're getting trained in the process of getting of applying. And so we certainly don't want you to feel like if you say something about being frustrated, that you're going to lose your job. We've got 55 homes throughout the Twin Cities area. You're going through the process of getting trained. We're going through the process of training you. We really want you to be part of our company. We'll find you somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with needing to transfer somewhere else. If you just realize you're not placed in the best spot, some of the behaviors you're experiencing, you just know are going to burn you out in a week or more. You just know that you can't handle it, that you can't deal with what you're experiencing. Just talk to your RS. We'll talk to HR and we'll find somewhere else to get you. We definitely want to find a spot for you, and we'd much rather go about that process of transferring and find a better situation for you rather than